welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And tonight we will be discussing The Bruising of Qilwa?
That's how I pronounce it. I've not bothered to see if there's an an audiobook that has pronunciation.
I'm just impressed I got all of that right without having it in front of me.
We do have the title in our notes. We don't have the author in our notes, but...
Without having it in front of me. You think I have the notes up already?
You've been typing in them. Don't lie to our listeners.
They're behind Zoom now, though.
Okay, that's fair.
Tonight we will be discussing The Bruising of Qilwa by Naseem Jamnia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing either of those things correctly, but we have done some rudimentary Googling, so I'm at least sure that I am not pronouncing them extra wrong. And that's the best I can say for myself. Sarah, what's the best you can say for yourself this week?
The best that I can say for myself, you've thrown me off with this structure of the question.
I'll fix it. What's something good that happened this week?
My good thing is that I put in, have I already said this? I don't think I've already said that I put in an archway in front of my house and I'm planted a rose to trail up it.
Well, you've told me.
I have told you.
Which means nothing.
But I don't think that I've told the world at large. And by that, I mean our podcast listeners. So I think that I'm in the clear to use that as my good thing.
All right.
It is a relatively recent, I put it up last week.
We've recorded like 4 episodes since then.
I know. But my point is that it still is recent enough to qualify as a good thing.
Well, that's wonderful. What kind of roses?
It's a David Austin rose. I was originally going to, stop me if this gets too boring, because I will go on and on ad nauseum about my roses. I bought a Cecil Bruner rose from Flowerland, my local nursery. And it's little itty bitty, very cute. It'll get bigger, but that was what I was going to put there. And then I decided that I would move my Willerton Old Hall rose, David Austin rose, from where it is and put that over the arch instead and put the Cecil Bruner where that rose was, because
it's already very boring. You can't just tell me a rose name. That means fucking nothing. Can you tell me like a color?
Okay, so the Cecil Bruner is a kind of pinkish color.
Thank you. That's a word that means something.
The Willerton Old Hall is white, or I assume it's white, given that most of the time the flower buds get bitten off by Bambi.
Fucking Bambi.
But long story short, I put it over the arch because where it used to be is shadier, and the pink rose does a little better in the shade than the white rose does.
Thank you. See, that was interesting.
Not for me. I want to talk I told you I would go on and on and on about my roses.
Yeah, but I needed you to go on and on and on in context.
Well, if you knew more about roses, it was in context.
This is a book podcast, not a rose podcast.
Fine. So what's something good that's happened to you this week?
K.R.R. Lockhaven had his book launch. His Kickstarter was funded. We had an episode about it some amount of time ago. I don't know how long ago that was.
A couple of months, I believe.
Years, eons.
I think the episode came out March-ish.
Well, he did a Kickstarter. The book was funded, and to celebrate, we went to the Elliott Bay Brewery in Burien and ate nachos and drank beer, and it was so much fun. I had an absolute fucking blast. I would like to say again, thank you to everyone who came out. It was so much fun to see you all, and it was fun to play some shuffleboard and eat nachos and drink beer. So, great night.
It was delightful. I was there too. I'm not using it as my good thing because we figured that only one person should use it as their good thing. But it was lovely.
We did have the entire conversation about who was allowed to claim that as their good thing. And since I technically made the reservation, I got to say it was mine.
Yes.
We were going to thumb wrestle, but that's hard over Zoom.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a combination of Martinelli's and homemade plum wine, because my plum wine needed something to sweeten it. plums are not particularly sweet. At least these plums aren't, especially when they have been fermented. And Martinelli's is very sweet.
Also, you're supposed to add sugar to wine, which you don't do. And then you're like, wow, this isn't sweet. And it's like, yeah, you add like 10 pounds of sugar to wine. That's pretty normal.
Well, A, I did add sugar to this wine. B, I know that one is supposed to add sugar to the wine, and I will for the stuff that I don't drink with the Martinellis. I am using this as an attempt to use up my Martinellis because it is too sweet to drink by itself.
Ah. See, I cannot get on board with that because Martinelli's is great.
It's too sweet for me.
For you, maybe.
I did say for me.
You did. I am drinking some more Madeira because I have that in the house now from a previous episode. It made sense in context, I promise. I would like to take this moment to make fun of the brand name, which is Blandies. I don't know any food item that wants to be branded as bland.
Maybe not. It's not what I would go for, that's true.
No, but it was a Madeira that cost less than $80, so maybe it is bland. I don't know. I think that if I was speaking to the owners, they would probably be upset that I made that connection. But that's on them for having a stupid ass name.
What if it's like their last name?
It is. They shouldn't have named the brand after themselves. I'm sorry, if your last name is Blandy, you cannot open a winery and name it after yourself. You can open a winery, don't name it after yourself.
Yeah, I don't have a rebuttal to that because I don't disagree.
I'm sorry. If my last name was shit ass garbage, I also would not name a beverage after my last name. That being said, Madeira's fine. It's good.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. Name notwithstanding.
Yeah, the name just deserves to be made fun of.
Fair enough.
Well, Sarah, I have not read anything that was not a podcast book in God knows how long. But have you?
I have. I read A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley.
How many tropes did she shove into that?
Oh, it was a lot. It was great. I mean,
okay.
Like it was
the correct amount, it sounds like.
It was the correct amount, yes.
All right.
There's a couple of delightful moments where the witch in question is wondering how accurate fan fiction is in regards to demon physiology. So there's a moment when they're about to bone and she asks like if he has a knot, and he's like horrified and doesn't understand what she's asking. And they have a great conversation about that right before they are about to get it on. It was a lot of fun. It was a fun book.
That does sound really fun, actually.
Yeah. Like tropey, sure. I mean, but that's kind of the whole point of it.
But doing something fun with the tropes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that means a lot. Well, the only thing I have read was The Bruising of Qilwa.
So we decided to read this book, well, twofold. One, this episode was chosen by our patrons on Patreon. So if you want to support us on Patreon, you too can choose from a list of books that we're going to cover and vote on which one you want us to cover.
Sorry, not a list of books that we are going to cover.
Oh, a list of potential books to cover.
Yes.
For this one episode, yes.
I'm only being pedantic because that's a huge difference.
It is a huge difference. You are correct. The list this time was novellas that were nominated for the Subjective Chaos kind of awards.
But Sarah, what is the Subjective Chaos kind of awards?
The Subjective Chaos kind of awards are, and I pulled up their website, an award that was created by a group of enthusiastic and dedicated science fiction, fantasy, horror, and speculative fiction readers that celebrates the best in genre fiction every year while acknowledging the subjectivity of our choices. I am a judge, one of the judges for the awards this year. So I was like, let's make this easy on me. I have to read these novellas anyway. Why don't we kill two birds with one stone?
Feed two birds with one loaf, as they say in the book.
I like that better.
Well, Sarah, are my very strong opinions going to poison you and influence your answers for the judgment?
I mean, subjectivity is right there in the name of the awards.
You were supposed to say no.
No. I've already made up my mind about this book.
Good. I didn't want to be accused of influencing the answer. That's all. You're supposed to throw me a bone there.
Yeah, I don't actually know how the judging process is going to work, to be perfectly honest.
Presumably, you form an opinion and then share it. Is that not it?
I genuinely don't know how we rank these books.
Is this the first year of these awards?
No. The awards have been going on since 2018, but I've never participated in them before.
Gotcha. To be fair, subjective is right in the name. You called it early.
It is right in the name. Also, chaos. Chaos is also right in the name.
And that's why they invited you.
Indeed.
Well, a couple of other things about this novella before we really dive into the conversation. There is almost every content warning under the sun.
Yeah, there's lots of content warnings for this book. Plague, xenophobia, racism, bullying, like discussions of dissection, lots of blood, self-harm, torture, body dysphoria, lots of things.
Here's a fun, dumb question. I am aware that body dysphoria and body dysmorphia are two different things. I know one of them is more closely related to eating disorders, and the other one is more closely related to gender identity. I am not sure which is which. I'm pretty sure both of them are in this book, though.
So I looked up dysphoria and dysmorphia earlier, and I think dysphoria is thinking that your body is wrong, like you are in the wrong body. And dysmorphia is thinking that your body is bad, that something about it is malformed.
Okay. And I could be reading too much into it, but there is... Oh, I actually, before we go any farther, before I finish this sentence, this is a novella. We are absolutely going to spoil the whole fucking thing.
Yes, we are not breaking this discussion into a non-spoiler and a spoiler section for this particular episode.
So this may be me reading too far into it, but at one point, one of the, I'm going to say secondary characters, I think if this was a full book, she would have been a main character. That's a conversation for 10 minutes from now. She's very specifically described as measuring her wrist, like by wrapping her thumb and middle finger around it and seeing how far her fingers overlap, which to me reads very much as a body whichever the correct one was in relation to eating disorders. And that could be me bringing my bullshit to the reading, but the explicit description just sounds so much like that experience that it feels like a direct reference, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
That's not how I read it. I also was not reading super closely because I was really depressed when I read it for various reasons, which meant that some things in this book I will defer to your remembrance of it. But when I read it, I took it more as like she had been starving, basically. She was just seeing how far things had come.
That's true. It could be coming from the other direction. The reason why I think it might be more of a reference to modern experiences is because the author does say, there's an author's note at the end where they describe their experiences as a Persian migrant, I think is the best way to sum that up. Obviously, read the entire book and author's note if you want the best description of it. But they talk about their personal experiences as a Persian being oppressed, but their culture having previously been the oppressor, which is something that's very much relevant to the book plotline as a whole. And so maybe that means I'm sort of relating too much modern shit to the prose because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that everything in the book necessarily has to have a one-to-one or does have a one-to-one modern equivalent the way that like major plot point does. But also, I mean, if it's something that could be read as triggering, then Jamnia is or was. I think they were previously a neuroscientist.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because there was a lot of medical garbage, and by which I mean not bad medicine, but garbage in this book. Oh, this book was filthy. Honestly, I loved it. It took maybe 50 to 60% to get to the really good gnarly bits, The beginning I felt was a little slow, which is ridiculous because it's a novella and overall went way too fast. But I think it weighed way more time setting shit up than going over the gnarly, gory bits. I think could have been more fun if it went the other way. Just saying.
I do think that it spent a lot of time setting stuff up, which I don't regret. I liked getting that insight into the world and like figuring out where we were in the setting. But I did also feel like the ending was too quick and that we should have spent more time there.
I think the answer is this is a novella, which is almost never the correct format for a story.
Okay, I disagree with you that it's almost never the correct format, but I do think that in this case, this book should have been, or this story should have been a full novel and not a novella.
Yes, I feel like novellas often feel like they are either rushed or like padded the hell out of. In this case, the first half felt fine, but then the second half probably should have lasted the entire length of a whole, like to fill the rest of a book. But instead it was squished into a novella. I only say almost always because The Great Gatsby exists. Is that the only acceptable novella? Possibly. Every other one should either be a short story or a whole book.
I have read plenty of novellas that I think are the right size.
Name one.
Run with the Hunted. Those are the right size.
Yeah, okay. That's a series. That's a series that changes the calculation.
Oh, the first novella would be great as a novella, even if you never read the rest of them.
Okay, yeah, you're right. There are some novellas that are okay. I never said none of them.
You didn't. It's true. Also, I haven't read The Great Gatsby still. I've never read it.
Actually, never?
No, I don't think I've ever read it.
It's some melodramatic bullshit. It's great. But this novella is not melodramatic. It is heart-wrenching and gory and horrifying in both philosophical and metaphysical ways.
Yeah. I actually wasn't expecting it to be quite as gory as it gets.
Oh, I'm definitely the horror reader out of the two of us.
Yeah, no question.
And that's probably the answer for why I jammed so hard with the second half of this. And you were like,
I mean, no, like don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed the second half of it. And once we got to the underground bits, I was like, okay, this is a great climax. It's just moving a little too fast for me because I feel like all of the plot points that we have seen up until now and are seeing needed a little bit more time to breathe. But I just hadn't been expecting there to be such vivid descriptions of blood and stuff.
it doesn't ease us into it at all.
Yeah.
So I could see the argument that the main character is a healer. They are, I would say, a nurse, basically, because they are not like a certified doctor. These are not terms actually used in the culture, but I think they're a decent comparison.
Yeah.
So they're doing all of the work with none of the appreciation.
All of the work, none of the pay.
Yeah, exactly. Although it sounds like the owner of the clinic also had none of the pay, so I'm a little less mad about it.
And also, it sounds like the main character gets a fair amount of appreciation.
True. Ferouz is called a healer, and at several points throughout the book, they're like, that's not right, but correcting people is too much work. Which is fair. I actually really liked Ferouz.
Yeah, all of the characters I thought were great, except that we didn't have enough time to really get to know them, with the exception of Ferouz, I think.
Yeah.
Because Ferouz was the main character. But I really wanted to see more of the relationships between characters and spend more time with the conflict that Ferouz had with some of them.
So Ferouz is the main character. They are a refugee. They are a oppressed minority ethnicity, and they are lying about their ethnicity. in order to sort of fly under the radar in this new place. And they have come to the city of Qilwa with their family, their mother and their little brother. And then very quickly they take on a student. Oh, and they work for a clinic run by an older man. And I feel like those are like all of the main characters. It very closely revolves around this nuclear family and their closely related peripherals.
Yes.
And I'm just going to go on a rant about small, intimate stories and why they should be whole novels. The idea that the characters aren't saving the whole world and therefore it shouldn't be a whole book. I'm sure that's not actually a conversation that ever happened, but
yeah,
it feels like it.
I don't think that was a conversation that Jamnia had with anyone when trying to get this book published, this novella published.
But why is it that you get these really great intimate stories that are just fucking crammed into these tiny page lengths and not given the justice they deserve? The like really important contemplation and exploration that would be very good for the story. And then you have these bullshit political monsters that could be summed up with people suck, and somehow they have 10,000 pages.
Okay, see, I really, really liked the political bullshit. I tend to like that stuff. So I was glad that it had that page length because I think it's an important part of the story.
I'm sorry, I was not talking about this story. I was talking about other stories.
Okay.
Sorry. No.
Okay. I was about to go defend the time spent dealing with political bureaucracy in this book.
Yes, but because the political bureaucracy in this book is dealt with from such a personal angle, I loved every second of it and could have had 10,000 pages more. But instead, we have gigantuan books that are like, is this country going to invade? Let's sit here and wonder about it for 10 pages of dialogue. Not naming any names. But I hate all of them. But I think these stories are so much more personal. It's still politics. It's about policies in this city that affect our main character and also thousands of refugees, but they matter on such a more personal level. That's the kind of shit I love to read about.
It's a lot easier in a story like this to see how this political maneuvering and this political bullshit actually impacts our main characters and like the people that you feel for than it is in some of the stories where it's more of a broader concept.
Well, then that's a badly done story, isn't it? Not this one, the other ones. If I feel like a decision isn't going to affect one of the characters on the page, then why should I care about the decision? That's not what we're talking about right now.
That's a whole other discussion.
We are talking about the blood plague. This book sure as hell took a turn. It starts out very much as, I would say, a moral discussion about refugees and immigration and the struggle of a city integrating an influx of new people into their population. And that goes on for about 50% of the book. And then suddenly, at almost exactly the halfway mark, we're like, oh shit. There's a secret magic blood assassin. That's not actually what's going on, but it could be. We don't know.
I mean, Fayrouz thinks that it's something like that for a while.
Yeah. I really loved the integration of magic and science in this story, in this world. I thought that was I'm such a sucker for atypical magic and the idea that the healing arts are a combination of elemental magic or structural magic, etc., with physicking was so much fun.
It was great, but again, I wanted more.
I feel like that was explained sufficiently. I think there could have been more information, but that didn't leave me going. And the plot of the book kind of left me going, that noise that I'm not going to make again.
I don't think you made a noise.
Did you not hear it?
No.
Oh. All right, let me try again.
I just heard a silence. I was like, are you making a face that our listeners cannot hear?
I
heard it that time.
That was the noise I made the first time. But more sincere and less forced. Which is why I was going to try to reproduce it, because I was like, fuck, I nailed it.
Maybe it'll be on the recording and I just didn't hear it.
Well, now this whole thing is there, so. But the mystery with where was this blood bruising disease coming from was so rushed. It was so rushed. This should not have been a novella. This story should not have been a novella.
Yeah, like I said before, there was so much crammed into this story. We haven't even talked about Peruz's brother's gender dysphoria.
Which one is it? I never know. And now I've poisoned you to never know also.
You have. But like we haven't even gotten into that. And that could have been, I mean, that was a subplot, but that could have had a whole lot more page space devoted to the conflict between their brother and them, because their brother doesn't think that they're working fast enough to figure out a way to like physically change him. So we could have had a whole lot more time spent on that. We could have had more time spent on the blood plague.
The mystery unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the world was built sufficiently. We hear about the Sasanians, who are refugees in this land, and we find out that they have an assignment ceremony that it sounds like everyone goes through, although I think maybe just the two siblings that we see are interested in.
Yeah, my impression was that it was only people who are interested in it go through it.
Yeah, but 100% of the people we see go through it. And so therefore I assume all of them do.
Just because it's 100% of the people we see doesn't mean.
Then maybe this should have been more than a novella.
But if it had been more than a novella, I don't think we would necessarily have seen more Sasanians who did or did not go through this assignment ceremony.
Possibly. It was a really cool idea, though. And then we also get some really fun linguistic stuff. Like, there's one language that has 10 bazillion pronouns, and then there's one language that has no pronouns at all, or just a single gender of pronoun. And there is some sort of very briefly touched upon bafflement there. By briefly, I mean in the first chapter, it's mentioned once. And clearly, this is an idea that has been fully developed and is fascinating. And in the entire book, we get 10 million different pronouns that I could not follow. I just wished they had more time. Like, the god has their own pronoun, and then there are some that only show up once.
There was a lot to keep track of in a very small story, or small pages, small word count. And I feel like it would have been easier to keep track of everything in a larger page word count. They're
also not explicitly explained, which is fine.
I really liked. I mean,
I agree, but not all of them had enough contextual space for me to figure out what was going on. And so again, if this was a longer story and each time a new pronoun was introduced, there was enough context for me to figure out, is this gender neutral? Is this a new gender that I haven't encountered yet? Which would be amazing. But if that's the case, I would like to know it. And that was just very unclear.
Yeah, I feel like this episode can be summed up by saying, excellent story. Really, really enjoyed it. Should have been a book.
Really should have been a book.
Or should have been a novel, a full novel.
I so rarely say a story needed more space.
It's true. It's very rare for you.
I'm usually like, this could have been half the length. Not this, no. I probably needed twice as much, frankly.
Yeah.
The first half was the correct length. And then the second half could have been 2 or 3 times longer.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And like that's not even expanding the story. Like you're not changing the plot at all if you do that. You're just giving all of these plot elements more space so that the reader can actually like enjoy them.
This ends up being a very emotional mystery that we don't have any time as the reader to process.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, oh my God, well, here's the big spoiler. The very sweet and loving clinic owner is actually the bad guy. And now also they're trying to kill our main character. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. That was basically me for the last half of this book. Oh no.
And there's also not enough time because for a while you're wondering if the blood plague is actually caused by Feyruuz's student, like unwittingly, because Feyruuz muses a little bit about how like these untrained blood magic users can unwittingly do a lot of harm, which ends up being very relevant to the plot, just not about the person that they're thinking about. But like as the reader, again, you don't have time to really wonder, oh, is it her? Because everything moves so fast. And now you know, oh, it's the clinic owner.
I really loved that there is no villain. And this is also something that the author talks about in their author's note. There is no villain. There's an antagonist, but no one is doing bad. They are just trying to do good and fucking it up real hard.
I mean, I would argue that they are doing harm, but it's not intentional.
Yeah. They're trying to do good.
They are trying to do good.
And fucking it up really hard. Feyruuz also has a really interesting struggle that gets exactly 1 sentence of contemplation because this story is too short. About how maybe if they had worked with their boss, if they had been honest with him, then maybe they could have guided the research and not have it gone off the rails. And none of the bad stuff would have happened, and only the benefits would have happened. I mean, obviously that way lies madness. That's so many what ifs, but it's such a genuine human reaction to tragedy that I wish it had more space in the story.
And also, I wish that we had seen more because so Feyruuz uses this blood magic and their boss like figures it out because this magic is viewed as very bad by the people who live in Qilwa, even though there's like nothing wrong with it. But I would have loved to see more. If this book had more page space, I would have loved to see more of the reader realizing that Feyruuz's boss knew and was trying to work with them.
Oh, the reader knew. There's a scene so early where Kofi emerges from a private space bleeding, and he's like, yeah, it's fine. And you're like, oh, yeah, you're doing blood magic. To be fair, I thought Kofi was a secret blood magic mage. I didn't realize that he was trying to recreate it and then accidentally making zombies.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I would have loved more scenes like that.
Or subtler scenes at the beginning that then like accumulated to that.
Yeah.
That felt like a grand reveal with no build-up. Kind of had mystery blue balls.
Yeah.
Yeah, this really was a story that was not right for this platform, this format. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, which is a shame because it's an excellent story. I really enjoyed reading it. I liked Jamnia's prose. I liked the characters. The world was really interesting. I loved how like the magic system was set up. I just wanted more of everything.
Okay, I do feel like the prose was shaky, but that's fine. It wasn't so shaky, it was distracting. It was just sometimes complexity is not the most important thing. And maybe you should kind of think about, rhythm and flow a little bit.
I liked it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many clauses you shove into one sentence.
I liked it. Clearly your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I think it was rougher at the beginning, and it actually like got better as the story went.
Smoothed out a little bit.
Yeah, it makes me think the author maybe just grew as they were writing the story.
Quite possible.
Yeah. Here's a weird random thing. What the fuck was going on with their mom?
Something that maybe could have been explored if this story had been not a novella.
Yeah, she is just completely gone. It's not completely absurd. You know, the main character is late 20s. Their younger brother is late teen or mid-teens, like 15. But they have a mother who's just kind of fucks off for the entire story. She's like, I'm in a bathhouse. Goodbye.
Yeah, like it's not that their mother is not around. It's just that we never see. I mean, the mother is present for the family, just we never see her ever.
Is she though? She doesn't bring in any income that we hear of. She's never cooking. It's always the main character who's doing the cooking. Like, what the fuck is this person doing?
She lives at the house, presumably.
She eats their food and spends their money. Like, this is not a mother. This is a woman who has given birth to people. Unless I'm wrong, in which case, maybe I should have seen that a little bit. Maybe she needed some more space on the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a dependent.
Yeah, it's I would have liked a little more exploration of what was going on with the family dynamics there.
Really, all I needed was one sentence saying, doesn't it suck that our mom is off praying and bathing all the time instead of doing literally anything else? But instead, every single scene at home is mom here? No? Good. And then just no further conversation about that. Great, glad she's gone. She just shouldn't be in our hair.
Yeah, it was a little weird.
Either parents have no expectation of child raising, which is a fascinating culture in this fantasy world that I'd like to know about, or parents are expected to have any input in their child's lives, and it's kind of weird that this one didn't, which I also would have liked to hear about.
Also, but I also think that there could be an argument made for expectations. I don't want to say being different when they are refugees, but behaviors being different when they're refugees.
But we also have the friend whose mothers are entirely involved in his life.
Are they refugees though? Or are they
also lived in the slums, I thought. I guess we don't know if they're refugees.
Yeah. Anyway, I think there's a lot that could have been explored there.
Yes, if there was just one sentence of, wow, she's dealing with trauma and can't handle these other bullshit things going on, that would have been great. I wanted to know that. I just wanted to know that. I would have had so much sympathy for this poor woman who had to travel with her family across country lines so that they would not be murdered. But no, it was just like, oh, good, she's out of the house.
Yeah.
It felt very much like those weird TV shows about high schoolers where there's never parents involved. And so the high schoolers just get up to absolute bullshit. And you spend the whole time thinking, where are their parents?
Yep.
Farouz was just a single parent to these two teenagers.
Basically. Yeah, basically.
And I just wish there was something.
Yeah, I would have liked a little bit of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a compliment that I wanted more of the story. I just feel like there's a lot missing. I feel like this was not the right story for a novella format.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, I agree with you because I think that Jamnia clearly had a lot to say in the story and just didn't have enough page space to say it.
I would bet money that they have answers to all of our questions.
I'm sure they do.
There just wasn't space. Yeah.
Like, I definitely got the sense from reading this that they had fully fleshed out the world and they knew all of this stuff that I wanted to know.
Yeah. And there are books that leave me going, oh, but I want more. And that's just me being an engaged reader. That's a very different experience from, no, I needed more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this story left me with. So in this book, Ferouz has a younger brother whose name escapes me and picks up a student whose name also escapes me, but they're 15-year-olds. And Ferouz spends, I think, an absurd percentage of the book, not actually that long, but for how short the book is, a large percentage, talking about how cute their crushes are on each other and like how much they like each other and how like sweet young romance is and all of that bullshit. And I was like, wow, they just met. Okay. Like, yeah, okay, yes, teenagers do pull that shit immediately, but you're an adult. Can you please move on? And then, like, a sentence later, not quite that fast, it felt like it. Ferouz is like, my student could someday become my sister. And I was like, whoa, you're already planning their wedding? That's way too much. And then it eventually became apparent that they meant that their student was like a sister to them because of, like, you know, sisterhood. But Ferouz spent so much time talking about their crushes on each other that I was like, excuse me. That's not on me. That's on the book for only introducing these poor teenagers as being romantic interests. That's immediately where my mind went.
I mean, that's where my mind went to, but I didn't mind it. So
really? They had known each other for like a day. And that's okay for teenagers to be planning a wedding because, again, teenagers can do anything.
I didn't take it as Ferouz actually planning a wedding or anything like that.
To someday become my sister? That's a... If you're talking about...
That's not planning a wedding, though.
Anticipating marriage out of a teenage crush is silly.
I don't think it goes as... I don't think it's as strong as anticipating. I think speculating, but I don't think anticipating.
I even speculate. If I saw two 15-year-olds who had crushes on each other, I would not go, maybe they'll get married someday. That's crazy. They're 15.
We don't know when people get married in this book.
Yeah, there is absolutely no mention of it, so I'm going to apply my culture to it. If the author wanted me to apply a different culture to it, they should have given me any indication of that. Maybe they needed more space to do that.
Yep.
But all of this is a moot point because clearly the main character sees their student as their little sister just because she's their little sister. So it didn't matter at all. And then I was like, well, you had me all panicked for nothing.
Yep.
Okay, but the fact that you also read that line that way makes me feel better.
Yeah, I did. That was how I read it.
The rest of the book made me think that the author didn't intend it that way.
I mean, I just viewed it as really idle speculation, like they then didn't think about because the two kids in question were 15.
I hate everything about that. They live together. This is like an adopted ward. That's very gross. I much would rather assume that the author did not intend that sentence to be read that way. And it was just a writing snafu.
What I'm saying is that they didn't think about it any further because they lived together. Like, not that it was a possibility, but that it was not a possibility afterwards. Like, it was just a really idle speculation.
The main character is the one who invited them to live together.
Right.
So that should never have crossed their minds. The idea that you're inviting a endangered homeless child to live with you and hope they hook up with your little brother is gross.
No, I didn't take it as that they hoped that she was going to end up with them. Just, oh, these two kids like each other. Maybe they'll end up together. Maybe not. And then they move on.
That should never have entered the conversation.
I took it as very, very idle speculation that Ferouz then didn't think about because it was not like relevant
because it was actually horrifying, and talk about bad power dynamics. Like, oh yeah, you rely on my family for charity, so you better say yes to whatever I want.
I didn't. That's not at all how I took it.
How is that not the implication? Like, that relationship is clearly bad. It should never have come up.
If they like each other, if they genuinely like each other.
Any two other 15-year-olds in the entire world, sure. Sarah's still making faces at me.
I mean, we disagree, but like, because nothing, like, it was a throwaway line.
I know. And that's what makes me think that we shouldn't have interpreted that way. Until you said anything, I was prepared to just say it was a throwaway line. I was wrong. But now suddenly you read it the same way, and I'm like, oh no. This is the one moment that I hate that you agree with me.
Maybe we're both interpreting it wrong.
I really hope so. With my entire heart.
But the two kids in question don't end up having a relationship. So, moot point.
Right? Like, they're close, but it's never romantic in any way. Which, again, I was like, oh, thank God I was wrong. The whole story revolves so much around family. There's no romance at all, except for that really weird comment at the beginning. Maybe we should interpret that as the main character is ace and is bad at interpreting chemistry.
Also quite possible.
And that would have worked really well if we had had some more time to see that sort of in detail.
Yep.
Well, because we know the main character is ace.
We do, yes.
And so maybe it was just them being goofy. That would be very funny, actually. The older sibling going, oh, maybe you'll like this person. And the little brother going, she's obviously my sister. What?
But I mean, it's also like a thing that teenagers fall in and out of love. Not that I think that they were in love at all, but like they can have crushes that are gone in 2 days.
I agree. And that's why the idea of it being she'll be my sister someday, that permanence is what freaked me out. It wasn't, it's cute they have crushes on each other. There's just a lot of variables, and we are trying to make a lot of assumptions because we have to. Because there's not enough in this book.
Yep.
Well, this novella has a lot of downs. I was going to say ups and downs. I don't think there's really any ups.
There's an up because they figure out Fairouz's brother's assignment at the end of the book, don't they?
I think they're like, we think we can do this later. It's almost like the book cuts off too soon. Well, it's a good mystery. That's revealed a little too quickly. If you like gore and mystery and horror, you're really going to like this book. If you like conversations about immigration and also the cultural nuances of different cultures who have lived in very close quarters for a long time and sort of the strange dynamics that come up between that. I mean, this book was a non-veiled metaphor for the Middle East in some ways. That's safe to say. I think the author says it in the end.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the author says it in their author's note at the end, yes.
So if you want a discussion about the completely absurd, saying absurd minimalizes it.
I mean, like if you want a discussion about refugees and immigration, this book does that.
It does. I guess what I'm trying to get at, the author describes, and also we see on the page almost explicitly, the conversation between a culture that was once dominant and is now oppressed, and sort of that strange experience for people who are alive while the culture is oppressed, but it was once the oppressor. I think that's a interesting conversation that has no answer, but I really appreciate that the author wanted to go there.
Yeah.
And I think that gets a lot of page time. That, I think, was clearly the point of the book. And then they introduce a lot of other shit that I was like, but what about that stuff?
It gets a lot of page time, but I also think it probably could have gotten more page time.
Oh, sure. Should this just have been an essay?
No, because it's a really interesting story.
That's true.
I don't think you would get that in an essay format.
Then it needed I was going to throw out a stupid huge number. And then I mean, maybe that's a reasonable number though. Then it needed 800 more pages. No, not that many.
No,
maybe 100 more pages.
I think it easily could have been a 300-page novel.
Well, how many is it now?
I don't know.
Well, then I can neither confirm nor deny that accusation.
But I think that it could have been a 300-page novel. 300 pages for fantasy is very short. These days, anyway.
I don't give a shit about fantasy. I'm talking about this story.
And I think this story could have done well in 300 pages.
I think this story needed 100 more pages. I don't know if we agree or disagree, because I don't know how many pages it has now.
Yeah, I don't actually either.
Mm-hmm. But I think 300 is an arbitrary number, and stories that try to fit arbitrary numbers clearly suffer for it.
But 100 pages is also an arbitrary number.
No, I'm saying 100 more.
Okay.
Saying 300 total when you don't know how many are there now is nonsense.
No, but I think that it's a reasonable estimate.
You're saying this could have been a trade paperback. Sure. Yes.
Yes, that is what I am saying.
My greater argument is that needing to market books at the perfect length is detrimental to storytelling.
Sure, but I think it could have been a trade paperback.
I mean, of course it could have been. Is that the ideal length?
I think it could have been a very good trade paperback. I think, yes, that probably would have been the ideal length.
Well, I have no counterpoint because I don't know how long it is now. So I read an ebook, and so that's meaningless. Could have been a great story. Good story could have been great. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I would have enjoyed it more had it been longer. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We are on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and some other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye!
Bye!